come Memories version 0.2. There's plenty, and I mean there's plenty I could talk about. Tripwire. Who said that? What? Yeah, let's be honest, it's not exactly the most balanced, but I'm not gonna go on a tangent about that right now. We all pretty much already know everything that's wrong with it. But all this poor balancing has brought to my attention one specific character. The dumb, stupid little cat named Blaze. She, unlike her counterpart in Silver, seems almost perfectly finished and properly balanced with a remarkable singular bug I have seen with her since release, that being throwing killers into Mario 64 paintings. That fact alone has made me even more interested in her than I was before 0.2 released, and while at first glance she could seem a mediocre survivor, much less threatening than a good Silver, Sonic, and the like, her kit is extremely useful for both team and solo survival when you really get into it. And get into it we shall. First, we need to start with her passive, since it's what makes her already very decent kit into something the EXE just simply can't ignore if used properly. Blaze is one of the survivors that gets a meter under her health bar, this one's flavor being that of a soul meter. Hitting her abilities fills this gauge a varying amount, and once it hits at least 50, she gains access to much stronger versions of her moves. It is a limit of 100, and the more you have, the longer some moves will last. Once I get to the moves themselves, I'll explain what variations they have with Soul. And wow, coincidentally, like I'm reading a script for a YouTube video or something along those lines, we have reached the first move. The namesake of which being either Roundhouse Kick or Soul Boost depending on how it's feeling that day. The day in question being if she's on the ground or airborne. Roundhouse Kick starts with Blaze winding up for about a quarter of a second and using 20 Soul if she has it available before launching forwards with iframes and kicking the EXE. If hit, this move will stun for approximately 2 to 3 seconds, knock the EXE back a few studs, apply burn if she does the Soul variation, and grant 35 Soul. If Blaze decides to hit the spacebar, however, this move turns into Soul Boost, a flying kick that aims wherever the camera is pointing and boosts Blaze in that direction. If the EXE is hit, it will bounce Blaze backwards a great distance, angled from where the camera is pointing, and grant 35 Soul. If 50 or more Soul is stockpiled, this move transforms once again into a tool for flight. At the cost of around 50 Soul per second, you can rocket off at Mach 5 wherever you want, only being impeded by how much Soul you have at the time. This variant keeps all the properties of the grounded stun, but it does look cooler when you do it. When using either variant, it'll go on cooldown for either 17 seconds if an EXE is hit, or 25 seconds if you miss it or you just use it as a traversal tool. Move 2, Burning Javelin / Soul Flame. This is the real bread and butter for helping teammates, since while she can stun, and it does help, it's the shortest stun in the game, barring the master plan of course. With Burning Javelin, she can take out a spear and twirl it around for aura points before she throws it in the straight line. If this hits the EXE, it doesn't actually stun, instead pushing them back a good distance before either breaking or hitting a wall. Hitting this will also grant 15 Soul, and speaking of Soul, if this move is used above 50, it completely changes into Soul Flame. This version doesn't even resemble the previous, changing out the Javelin for an industrial-grade flamethrower, which lasts until she completely runs dry of Soul power, using about 15 Soul per second. If the EXE is hit with this, they're pushed back and flame is applied to them, and for each consecutive hit that's landed with the move, a stack of flame is added onto the EXE. For example, if just one pushback is hit, the EXE will only be on fire and therefore slowed for about 2 to 2.5 seconds. But if a couple more are hit, that time can keep exponentially increasing all the way to what seems like 15-20 seconds from my testing at the maximum, allowing the burn to persist well after the move has ended. Another very important part of this move is that Blaze is nearly fully during it. The only things she can be hit by are Tripwire's Mines and 2011X using God's Trickery, but anything else phases through her completely, including Kolossos' Charge, which is important, but I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Either version she uses, and no matter if it hits or not, this move goes on a 24-second cooldown after it ends. Now, you're finally in a game as the aforementioned kitty cat. How should you be acting? Well, akin to an actual house cat, you will either want to be off on the sidelines, not particularly near anything, or be extremely aggressive at all times. I normally lean to the latter option. Since Blaze's cooldown for her dropkick change if you hit or miss, normally you're going to want to be in the killer's face, constantly hitting dropkicks, racking up soul points, and generally just being a burning mosquito. My go-to variant for stuns is the grounded one, since it's a bit less noticeable when it's a half a second wind up into an instant hitbox rather than a dramatic front flip into the air and channeling the burning unbridled light of the sun onto your foot, only to get immediately blocked and grab comboed. The hitbox on the grounded version is a tad weird when you're first using it, since she has a bit of an arc with her movement, jumping high enough that she can sometimes jump over John Rage mode if used on a slight incline, or just straight up miss Jane Minefield because she's so small. Don't worry though, it's pretty easy to consistently hit the hulking frame of Jimmy Bulldozer. The existence of this arc will screw up your stuns in the beginning. Be prepared to ragdoll onto the floor like 9 times per match when you're starting to learn her. But once you understand the trajectory and the fact that until she hits the ground she's a constant hitbox with frames, it's not too horrible to hit. But I hear you. You don't want to look like the dumbest Blaze on the planet in front of unnamed Silvermane number 972. A more consistent way of hitting 2011X and Kolossos, you have to predict Tripwire because she's always in the fucking air, is by trying to start the kick while literally inside of their hitbox. Not only does this nullify the problem of sometimes just flying over the killer, it also gives a little bit less of a reaction time for either flavor of evil Sonic to react. Tripwire doesn't need to react because he's already cosplaying a fighter jet 5,000 miles in the air. The movement potential of Blaze also can't be glossed over. Even disregarding her literally just being able to fly away if she has soul, the amount of bounce she gets from hitting an aerial dropkick is incredible, and can be used to scale mountains if hit. Just make sure you're actually gonna hit it, lest you get immediately taken out back and stabbed 17,000 times. Wow, Blaze! You just burned that man alive and got cream out of a grab. Thanks! That gives her a glimmer of hope before she gets skewered by a freight train and taken to the other corner of the map. Is what I would say if your second move didn't coincidentally just come off cooldown and use Soulfire to push Kolossos off the map into the abyss, never to be heard from again apart from that one Knuckles that he just dropped on top of and immediately did 85 damage to. Javelin is pretty self-explanatory. If you're in a long hallway, then throw the EXE all the way back to the end of it, or if applicable, off the nearest available cliff. Soul Flame is a very good get-off-me tool, but very punishable if you get too greedy, since it doesn't actually stun the killer, and they can still close the distance even if they are slowed. So try and save it for charge-type moves, or a last-ditch effort to save the last life cream on 15 HP. Now, hold on, go back. This is a video about the arsonist cat, right? Why has the hulking corpse been mentioned like 5 times so far? Good question. That's because they both kind of counter each other. On Blaze's side, Kolossos has the slowest running speed of all the killers, meaning a well-placed javelin could really screw up a chase for them, and Soul Boost can completely nullify a charge depending on the amount of soul in storage. However, on the other side, both of her stuns have a very noticeable wind-up, leaving it mildly simple to block if they're paying a modicum of attention, and if they really don't want to get hit by a javelin, they can just use charge and turn the tables on who's getting skewered. But, turning the tables once again, I'm sorry table, you must be getting dizzy. If the Blaze knows Kolossos is experienced and looking out for stuns, she can run up as she were attempting a stun and instead use javelin. And due to a javelin not stunning, you will have successfully made Kolossos look stupid. Now, I can't talk about the corpse without talking about the Muppet, can I? Blaze has a very unique matchup against Tripwire, much like James Fly does, and while you could play like normal, stunning and running, oh shit, bars, I find it much more rewarding to play like a support and disable mines with your javelin. This creates a very unique scenario where it's actually a bad thing to have too much soul, since it'll lock you out of javelin in favor for Soulfire, which for some reason can't activate mines. My game plan in this matchup is usually to stay back, scan for mines to destroy, and attempt to distract Tripwire while Javelin's off cooldown. If I have too much soul, I'll just use Soul Boost, aerial dropkick in case you forgot, you brain-rotted TikTok-pilled bastard, to reposition myself and get rid of all that pesky soul along the way. Map-wise, Blaze doesn't really have any outstanding maps, or maps where she's useless, but certain sections of Green Hill have enormous drops that can buy you a lot of time, And Mystic Cave has a couple jumps, 2 out of 3 killers. Fuck you, Tripwire. Can't make without abilities or at least a little bit of rerouting. What if that previous scenario with Cream ended differently? What if, instead of you being able to help her, 6 survivors who are all suspiciously on their last life got communally skewered by Kolossos and systematically picked off until you were the last one remaining? In that scenario, you could be a little bit concerned, but don't worry. All that you being on your own now really means in the long run is that your soul now gets the chance to burn bright. Blaze in solo gets a pretty noticeable buff to both her stuns and her soul gauge gain. On hit, her stun cooldowns are now decreased all the way down to 10 seconds, allowing for some very quick movement. Do keep in mind that the miss cooldown remains higher, but still a tad lower than usual at 17 seconds. But besides that, hitting either the grounded or aerial stun variation will now grant a gobsmacking, lip-licking, toe-curling 45 soul, with the javelin giving 25. This allows for easy use of Soulfire, but that doesn't mean it should just be used whenever, as if you're caught without it, that's a free charge or at the very least a dropkick usage for either Kolossos or 2011 if there's no available springs around. Save it specifically for either a charge, extreme emergencies, or if you can push them off a ledge that'll get you a lot of time. But what if you do have to use it in the aforementioned extreme emergency? Well, it depends. If you're in an area with a good incline, try and trap them in a corner so you can use all of your soul and get maximum coverage out of the move, then quickly get to higher ground if it's Kolossos, or start praying to God if it's 2011. A good but risky strat is to hit them right out of Soulfire, since it'll refill some of that soul gauge and also give you time to get away while the fire is still going. Just be careful as they might immediately use block/charge if it's Kolossos, or invis/God's trickery if it's 2011. And that should cover it. Obviously there will be some map specific things, corners you can cut with boost and whatnot, but I'm sure you can find that yourself. Yes, you specifically, we are starting a parasocial relationship right now. Unrelated, give me your credit card information.